6 months after war erupted in Europe, there are growing fears here in Asia that conflict could be coming here too. So I've come to Taiwan to work with our local team here and speak with Foreign Minister Joseph Wu about the surging tensions with China. Is this region on a slippery slope towards a devastating conflict? And what is Taiwan doing to avoid it? Joseph Wu, thank you so much for joining DW and taking the time to speak with us. We're speaking just as there's another sign of the tensions across the Taiwan Strait. A Chinese drone that was flying over one of the outlying islands very close to the Chinese mainland. Taiwanese troops fired warning shots at that. What are you trying to say with those warning shots, and how do you interpret, what are these drone flights, which are so persistent, it seems, what are they trying to achieve?
For the drones flying over Jinmen, specifically, the Chinese are trying to engage in cognitive warfare. They want to shoot some scenes and to show in their social media, to show that the Taiwanese soldiers are incompetent, things like that. And therefore, the Chinese will continue to do it when they find that those kinds of footages are useful for them for their domestic propaganda. But I think that's just a small part of what China is trying to do to Taiwan. If you look at what China is trying to do to Taiwan, it's a large picture of their military ambition over us. For example, if you look at the first part of August, they conducted missile tests and then large-scale air and sea exercises, and also cyber attacks, disinformation campaign, and economic coercion. So if you put all this together with the drones' disturbances to our outer islands, this is part of their playbook in the future invasion of Taiwan.
Minister, for the Jinmen incident, your spokesperson called China a thief and the regional troublemaker. Is it a bit too harsh? Does this war of words help ease the tension?
No, actually, if you look at what China's spokesperson in its Ministry of Foreign Affairs was saying, he was saying that Taiwan is part of the Chinese territory, and therefore for the Chinese drone to fly over Chinese territory is nothing. But that is very offensive because Taiwan is not part of China and we are not Chinese territory. And for the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson to say that is unacceptable to the Taiwanese people. And therefore we have to fight back by saying that that is unwelcomed.
Minister Wu, we've seen during the course of these exercises and since the exercises also ostensibly finished that China has been defining a kind of new normal, is the expression, that they're traversing the median line of the Taiwan Strait more frequently. How is Taiwan going to be responding to this new normal?
This is a tough situation for us. I must be very frank about this. Even though the Chinese government has already announced the end of their large-scale joint military exercises, but their military activities along the Taiwan Strait or around Taiwan has not stopped. They continue to fly their airplanes and sail their ships to the waters or airspace near Taiwan to patrol the area or trying to upset the status quo. When we recorded their air activities, they have between 5 to 15 airplanes crossing the medium line of the Taiwan Strait, and 2 to 3 times of that number of sorties conducting air exercises either in the northern part or southern part of Taiwan's ADIZ. So the kinds of disturbances to us or aggression against Taiwan is still there. So even though with the announcement of the end of large-scale military exercises, they continue to do it. And if you look at their ships coming close to Taiwan, they have between 5 to 8 military ships coming very close to Taiwan, right before the 24-mile adjacent water line. So the situation is still very tense, and we have been keeping alert. And this is the situation that we say China is trying to destroy the status quo, or at least the symbol of the status quo, which is the median line of the Taiwan Strait. You know, the median line of the Taiwan Strait has been there for decades, safeguarding peace and stability over the Taiwan Strait. And without that tacit agreement, The two militaries are going to come very close to each other. And the Chinese are coming so close that it compresses the depths of our air defense, and it can create a very dangerous situation. Status quo across the Taiwan Strait has been seen as the interest of all parties concerned in this area or globally. And when China is trying to destroy the status quo, it's not in the interest of us or the international community.
Minister Wu, you talked about the median line, but China says they have never agreed on that. Does that mean this unofficial demarcation line is not there anymore?
We wish that, or I should say, we hope that it's still there, because it's been there for decades, safeguarding peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. The Chinese has this long plan in destroying the status quo. Their military spokesperson last June, say that there's no such thing as a medium line of the Taiwan Strait. And this year, the spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs say that the whole Taiwan Strait is China's waters. It's not international water. It belongs to China's sovereignty, and China has a sovereign jurisdiction over the Taiwan Strait. But Taiwan Strait, in reality, has been international water for a long, long time. And therefore, the Chinese have this plan to make sure that its claims can support its military activities. And this is exactly what they are trying to do. They say there's no such thing as a medium line of the Taiwan Strait, and they fly their airplanes across the medium line. And these kinds of activities are destabilizing, and it's provocative, and can be very dangerous. And we oppose it. And I think the international community, especially coming from the fellow democracies, they all oppose what China has been doing.
Now, you've described the exercises that have been taking place, and you described this kind of ratchet effect of great attention across the strait. But you described the exercise as a kind of rehearsal for a potential invasion. What is your sense? Are you concerned that an invasion really is potentially coming? And if so, what kind of a timeline are you currently looking at?
Well, I cannot comment on the timeline. But if you look at the Chinese statement, the statements coming from their senior officials, they've been saying that Taiwan belongs to China, and they want to unify with Taiwan peacefully if possible, and by force if necessary. And this is not only some officials, it's virtually all officials are talking about this, beginning from Xi Jinping himself. And in order to substantiate this kind of claim, they have been conducting military exercises along the Taiwan Strait or around Taiwan for a long time. If you look at the trajectory of their military threat against Taiwan in the last few years, you see more and more Chinese airplanes, their sorties, coming close to our ADIZ, and they are flying closer and closer to Taiwan. And their ships are also increasing in number, creating threat scenarios. So if you put all this together, you see that the Chinese seems to be preparing for a war against Taiwan for what they claim unification of their country. So what they were doing at the first part of August was just an exercise according to their playbook against Taiwan. Let me say it again. They fired missiles to the waters near Taiwan. They conducted very large-scale air and sea exercises. They conducted cyber attacks against Taiwan. They conducted disinformation campaign against Taiwan. And at the same time, they also engage in economic coercion. So put it all together. This is what they want to do to Taiwan when they want to invade Taiwan.
And all of these exercises were a response to Nancy Pelosi's visit here at the beginning of August. When you reflect on that visit, there was a lot of debate about whether it was the right thing to do. Yeah. Was it worth it for all of this?
Let me make a clarification. The Chinese were claiming that Speaker Pelosi's visit to Taiwan is something that they need to respond to. But Speaker Pelosi's visit to Taiwan is just one of those strings of visitors coming to Taiwan. And there was presidents, for example, Newt Gingrich also visited Taiwan before. And we have so many senators and congressmen or senior officials visiting Taiwan from other parts of the world. And from this, you can see that China just used this as a pretext to launch that military threat against Taiwan. And what I would say is that Speaker Pelosi's visit to Taiwan is a morale booster for the Taiwanese people. Taiwan has been facing the threat from China for all this time. And if there's anyone want to show their support for Taiwan, he or she is highly appreciated. And Speaker Pelosi is a notable American leader. And her willingness to come to Taiwan to show support to the Taiwanese people, I think this is a great thing for the Taiwanese people to see. And the Taiwanese people, throughout surveys or through real actions, they show their enthusiasm in welcoming the speaker. And after speaker's visit to Taiwan, even though with the Chinese military threat, there are more people who want to come to Taiwan and show their support. And you're seeing some visitors in Taiwan at this time because they want to show support to Taiwan. And all these kinds of show of support to Taiwan are highly appreciated. And for the Chinese claims, I think we need to clarify that China just want to find a pretext. If they don't find the pretext of Speaker Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, they will find something else, and they can always find something else. If they can find Speaker Pelosi's visit to Taiwan as an excuse to launch such a large military scale exercises, I think they can find many more excuses. So that's just the Chinese authoritarian way of doing things. And let me tell you in a very frank way, the Chinese military threat against Taiwan will not stop Taiwan from making more friends. And at the same time, it will not stop international friends to come to Taiwan and show their support to us.
Minister, what is your assessment of Russia's invasion of Ukraine? People have been calling it a wake-up call for Taiwan. What lessons are you drawing from how the war is unfolding?
This is a very interesting question. At the same time, we see the war in Ukraine is still going on. We also see the Chinese military threat against Taiwan increasing. Over in the European theater, we saw that back in 2014, Russia took hold of Crimea. And the world response was not enough to stop Russia from going further. And now we end up a war in Ukraine. And in Ukraine, we saw that was truly unfortunate that a democracy or a sovereign country that was under attack by an authoritarian regime. But the Ukrainians were showing their bravery by defending their country, defending their democracy. And the kinds of bravery also attracted lots of international support. So that is inspirational to the Taiwanese people because we understand that the Chinese can also do the same thing to Taiwan. And by that time, we want to show to the international community that we are just about the same degree of bravery in fighting for our country, fighting for our democracy, fighting for our people, and fighting for our democratic way of life. And in East Asia, if you look at the longer span of political events, Hong Kong is something that we need to keep in mind as well. Just a couple of years ago, when the Chinese government was imposing the national security law on Hong Kong to take away every bit of freedom away from the Hong Kong people. A lot of people around the world are asking, is Chinese government going to stop at Hong Kong, or who is the next? And at that time, a lot of people are already talking about Taiwan might be the next. And I think the story can go further. Is Taiwan going to be the last target of the Chinese authoritarian expansion? I would say no. The reason is very clear. China also claims East China Sea, and they've been conducting military exercises or sending their ships to the disputed water. China also claims South China Sea, and their daily patrol of the South China Sea, either by their bombers or by their warships, is so frequent these days. Is China limited, or is the Chinese ambition limited to East China Sea, Taiwan Strait, and the South China Sea? I can tell you, no, if it's not stopped. China already signed a security agreement with the Solomon Islands, which is very far away from China. And if we don't stop it, the Chinese government is going to sign more security agreements with more Pacific countries. Remember, the Chinese leader has already said the Pacific Ocean is big enough to accommodate China and the United States. That's how ambitious they are. And are they limited to the Indo-Pacific region or the Pacific area? I would say no. If you look at the naval bases they are building in Cambodia, in Myanmar, in Pakistan, in Sri Lanka, all the way to Djibouti, I think they have global ambition. And the expansion of authoritarianism always is at the cost of democracy. And I think it's a time for democracy to unite to stop the authoritarianism from expanding further.
Minister Wu, though, how seriously is Taiwan taking this threat in military terms? I mean, we've heard very recently Taiwan is increasing its defense budget by almost 14% from 2022 to 2023. But that still just takes defense spending to 2.4% of GDP. If we compare that with the United States, it spends 3.7%. Israel, which faces maybe a similar sort of existential threat, 5.6%. How is it enough for Taiwan to be spending less than half of what Israel spends on its defense?
This is a very good question. We understand that the defense is not free, and it may cost a lot of money. And therefore, if you look at the increase of our military budget in the last few years, it's been increasing steadily. And other than increasing our military budget, we also conducted the reform of our military strategy. For example, we have already established an all-out defense mobilization agency responsible for designing how Taiwan can mobilize itself for the homeland defense. And we also acquire asymmetric weapons and to discuss with the United States how we can best approach the strategy of asymmetricity. And this is the kinds of things that we are looking at. And we, of course, understand that the more military budget is needed. And other than the regular military budget, as you saw from the press, we also have special budget that is used for items like missiles or jet planes. So these are what we try to do. And we understand the importance of this, and the government is determined to increase our military budget.
So do you think the people of Taiwan need to kind of anticipate maybe spending here needs to hit the 5% of GDP kind of range, sort of comparable to Israel?
Well, if you look at the increase of Taiwan's economy in the last few years, the kinds of increase that we have is already substantial. And what I can tell you is that the government is determined to continue to increase our military budget.
At the same time, of course, Taiwan is very, very dependent on the United States for its security in terms of providing weapons and also the sort of implicit promise of support from the United States. But I want to talk about what we've heard from President Biden over the last year or so. On 3 separate occasions, Joe Biden has said, yes, the United States would defend Taiwan, going beyond the official US policy, only for the White House press team within 24 hours having to walk that back and say, oh, no, nothing's changed. It's exactly the same. How does that make you feel, this sense of complete confusion about the US policy coming from the president himself?
Well, we're not confused. We are very clear that the defense of Taiwan is our own responsibility. And we also are very clear about what the Taiwan Relations Act says. The Taiwan Relations Act says that the United States is obligated to provide Taiwan with defensive articles. And the U.S. has been living up to the commitment of the Taiwan Relations Act, and we appreciate that very much. In the last few years, our relations with the Biden administration has been very well and going very strong, and we have been discussing Taiwan's defense need, the kinds of defense strategies that Taiwan will need to be able to defend itself. So we don't doubt on the U.S. commitment to Taiwan. It's been very clear. And I need to tell you once again, the defense of Taiwan is our own responsibility. If we are not committed to our own defense, we don't have the right to ask others to sacrifice. And under these kinds of circumstances, we need to show that we are determined to defend ourselves. And just like the case of Ukraine, it's only the Ukrainian people showed their determination to defend themselves, then you can see the outpouring of international support for Ukraine. And that is what we are looking at too.
Yes, but I want to return to Biden's comments because you say you're not confused, but I'm confused, and many of people are confused about why Joe Biden said something that we have promised to go beyond what was really promised. How do you interpret that? Is he creating a kind of next level strategic ambiguity? Is he having a senior moment? Is he on top of things? What's your interpretation?
Well, we have been working together with the Biden administration as a whole. And we have been speaking to senior officials on what the U.S. policy is, on what the United States support will be. And this kind of real situation has no ambiguity to us. And we understand that the U.S. is committed to providing weapons to Taiwan for Taiwan's self-defense. And the U.S. is also seriously engaging Taiwan for security discussions. So these are what the United States has been providing. And we will continue to discuss with the United States on what we would need. And other than that, you should probably also look at the U.S. presence in this region and the way they show their presence in this region. Just a couple of days ago, you saw two U.S. ships sailing through the Taiwan Strait. That is the way the United States is showing its presence in this region. And by doing that, I think the U.S. is showing its commitment to peace and stability in this region. And it is not just the United States that is doing that. We saw Australia, Canada, UK, France, and etc. They also sent their ships to this region to conduct freedom of navigation operations in line with their Indo-Pacific strategy. So it's not only the United States that has a stake in the peace and stability in this area. It's a lot of countries that understand the stake of peace and stability in this area, and they want to show that they care about this by sending their ships to this region.
Minister, there are around 2 million Taiwanese people living in China, and China is Taiwan's largest trading partner. Isn't your government simply too dependent on the US, putting eggs in the same basket?
Well, a lot of people are saying different things. Some people are saying that we are too dependent on China. And at the same time, there are also people criticizing the Taiwanese government for depending solely on the United States. But the real situation is like this. Our relations with China is quite complicated. On the one hand, China is our number one trading partner and probably number one or number two destination for our outbound investment. And that is the fact that we cannot deny. But at the same time, China is also our only source of threat. And that is also the fact that we have to reckon with. And when China is threatening Taiwan to such a degree, we have to look around and see who else can provide Taiwan with support. And we see the United States and we see other democracies. So this is what we can count on. If there's going to be more hostility in between Taiwan and China, we need to unite the fellow democracies to come to Taiwan's support. And I think the support has been increasing. If you look at the statements of G7 or NATO summit or EU summit or other platforms of 2+2s, you can see that there are more and more discussions of Taiwan issue. They all talk about the importance of peace and stability over the Taiwan Strait. Indirectly, they are saying that Chinese military threat against Taiwan is unwelcomed. So this is the situation we are seeing. We not only rely on the United States, we have more and more support from fellow democracies.
Now, the head of the main opposition party here, the Kuomintang, Eric Chu, we've been speaking to him. He's been speaking to DW as well. He's accusing your government of, I quote, putting Taiwan in a dangerous situation by not having sufficient dialogue, not attempting dialogue with the mainland, with Beijing. He says that the Ukraine war shows that Taiwan needs to seek that dialogue. What do you say to that?
Well, I'm the Minister of Foreign Affairs. I don't want to get into a domestic political debate. But the reality is like this. Taiwanese government has been open to dialogues with China. The president says that. The government officials have been repeating that. As long as China is willing to discuss with Taiwan without any preconditions, Taiwan will be very forthcoming in engaging in dialogue with China. And therefore, criticizing Taiwan government for not having the dialogue is barking upon the wrong trees. I think it's what the Chinese government wants to do. They want to cut off the connections or communications with the Taiwanese government and create internal confusions over here, or to create internal contradictions in Taiwan so that Taiwan is weakened and we will not fall into that trap.
But do you see any scope for negotiations achieving anything with China, going anywhere with China? I mean, you mentioned before that we have these kind of two almost implacable opposites. We have Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party saying that they're adamant they want to, as they put it, reunify with Taiwan. In Taiwan, we have public opinion. Only a vanishingly small percentage of people want to unify with China. Mm-hmm. How do we resolve this without war?
There's a lot we can do. I'm not 100% optimist, but I always try to see the kinds of opportunities that are out there. And I think the best opportunity lies in Taiwan itself. Taiwan is a democracy. We are fully open to all kinds of opinions. And Taiwan's democracy is stable and resilient. And as long as Taiwan can stay democratic, I think there's always a very good future for Taiwan. And as long as Taiwan stays democratic, we will continue to receive support from the international community. And this is not going to go away. Taiwan will be a democracy. And when we go out of position, by this term of the president, we are going to pass on to our next generation this very solid founded democracy. And this democracy is going to prevail in the long run. On the contrary, if you look at China's political system, it might look powerful and it might look threatening. But authoritarian regimes might profoundly weak. Look at their domestic issues that they have to handle these days. Maybe all of a sudden the Chinese people will say that no, this is not what we want. We want something like Taiwan.
So are you counting on the Chinese Communist Party collapsing and democracy coming to China? Is that your greatest hope?
No, that's not what I said, and I'm not going to predict. But we have faith in Taiwan's democracy. As long as we are democratic, I think we will be doing fine. The Chinese military threat is there. That is one fact that we have to reckon with, and we'll continue to beef up our defense capabilities so that we can defend ourselves. But at the same time, the Chinese military threat is there. And if the Chinese military threat against Taiwan is unwelcome, not only by the Taiwanese people, but also by the world at large, I think the international community will come together and tell the Chinese leaders that your military threat against Taiwan is not a good solution.
Minister, now we come to the name of Taiwan. Well, we say Taiwan all the time in English, but we all know that in Taiwan, the constitution that you abide by is the Constitution of Republic China. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about this confusion, is your government pursuing de jure independence? Is this a long-term dream?
That's a very good question. The President Tsai, was elected based upon the promises to the people that we would safeguard the status quo. We would look at the status quo as serving the best interest of all parties concerned. And therefore, the policy of this government is to safeguard the status quo. The status quo that the Republic of China, Taiwan, and the People's Republic of China have no jurisdiction over each other. The status quo that Taiwan is already a democracy. The status quo that Taiwanese people have a say over Taiwan's future. So this is a status quo over Taiwan, and that's the policy that we are pursuing.
Yet you are on the China's list of Taiwan independence diehards.
That's what they claim. That's what they want to impose on me. I would say that I'm the one who wants to pursue and maintain Taiwan's status quo.
Joseph Wu, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to DW today.
Absolutely welcome. Thank you.